Chapter 51 of April's Lady. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Linda Marie Nielsen, Vancouver, BC. April's Lady by Margaret Wolfe Hungerford. Chapter 51. While bloomed the magic flowers we scarcely knew the gold was there, but now their petals strew life's pathway. And yet the flowers were fair, fed by youth's dew and love's enchanted air. The cold evening air breathing on Joyce's flushed cheeks calms her as she sets out for the walk that Barbara had encouraged her to take. It is an evening of great beauty. Earth, sea, and sky seem blended in one great soft mist, that rising from the ocean down below floats up to heaven, its heart a pale, vague pink. The day is almost done, and already shadows are growing around trees and corners. There is something mystical and strange in the deep murmurs that come from the nestling woods. The sweet wild coo of the pigeons, the chirping of innumerable songsters, and now and then the dull hooting of some blinking owl. Through all, the sad tolling of a chapel bell away in the distance, where the tiny village hangs over the brow of the rocks that gird the sea. While yet the woods were hardly more than brown, filled with the stillness of the dying day, the folds and farms and faint green pastures lay, and bells chimed softly from the grey-walled town. The dark fields with the corn and poppies sown, the dull, delicious, dreamy forest way, the hope of April for the soul of May, on all of these nights wide, soft wings swept down. Well, it isn't night yet, however. She can see to tread her way along the short young grasses down to a favorite nook of hers, where musical sounds of running streams may be heard, and the rustling of growing leaves makes songs above one's head. Here and there she goes through brambly ways, where amorous arms from blackberry bushes strive to catch and hold her, and where star-eyed daisies and buttercups and delicate faint-hearted primroses peep out to laugh at her discomfiture. But she escapes from all their snares and goes on her way, her heart so full of troublous fancies that her many wiles gain from her not so much as one passing thought. The pretty, lovely May is just bursting into bloom. Its pink blossoms here and its white blossoms there mingle gloriously, and the perfume of it fills the silent air. Joyce picks a branch or two as she goes on her way, and thrusts them into the bosom of her gown. And now she has reached the outskirts of the wood, where the river runs, crossed by a rustic bridge, on which she has ever loved to rest and dream, leaning rounded arms upon the wooden railings, and seeing strange but sweet things in the bright, hurrying water beneath her eyes. She has gained the bridge now, and leaning languidly upon its frail ramparts, lets her gaze wander afield. The little stream, full of conversation as ever, flows on unnoticed by her. Its charms seem dead. That belonged to the old life, the life she will never know again. It seems to her quite a long time since she felt young, and yet only a few short months have flown since she was young as the best of them, when even Tommy did not seem altogether despicable as a companion, and she had often been guilty of finding pleasure in running a race with him, and of covering him not only with confusion, but with armfuls of scented hay, when at last she had gained the victory over him, and had turned from the appointed goal to overwhelm the enemy with merry sarcasms. Oh yes, That was all over, all done. An end must come to everything, and to her light-heartedness an end had come very soon. Too soon, she was inclined to believe, in an excess of self, until she remembered that life was always to be taken seriously, and she had deliberately trifled with it, seeing only the very heart of it, the gaiety, the carelessness, the ease. Well, her punishment has come. She has learned that life is a failure after all. It takes some people a lifetime to discover that great fact. It has taken her quite a short time. Nothing is of much consequence. And yet, she sighs and looks around her. Her eyes fall upon a distant bank of cloud overhanging a pretty farmstead, and throwing into bold relief the ricks of hay that stand at the western side of it. A huge black crow standing on top of this is napping his wings and calling loudly to his mate. Presently he spreads his wings, and with a creaking of them like the noise of a sail in a light wind, disappears over her head. She has followed his movements with a sort of lazy curiosity, and now she knows that he will return in an hour or so with thousands of his brethren, darkening the heavens as they pass to their night lodgings in the tall elm trees. It is good to be a bird. No care, no trouble, no pain. A short life and a merry one. Better than a long life and a sorry one. Yes, the world is all sorry. She turns her eyes impatiently away from the fast vanishing crow, and now they fall upon a perfect wilderness of daffodils that are growing upon the edge of the bank a little way down. How beautiful they are! Their soft, delicate heads nod lazily this way and that way. They seem the very embodiment of graceful drowsiness. Some lines lately read reoccur to her and awake within her memory. I wandered lonely as a cloud that floats on high o'er vales and hills, when all at once I saw a crowd of golden daffodils, beside the lake beneath the trees, fluttering and dancing in the breeze. They seemed so full of lazy joy, or unutterable rapture, that they belie her belief in the falseness of all things. There must surely be some good in the world that grows such charming things, things almost sentient. And the trees swaying above her head, and dropping their branches into the stream, is there no delight to be got out of them? The tenderness of this soft, sweet mood, in which perpetual twilight reigns, enters into her, and soothes the sad demon that is torturing her breast. Tears rise to her eyes. She leans still further over the parapet, and drawing the pink and white hawthorn blossoms from her bosom, drops them one by one into the hasty little river, and lets it bear them away upon its bosom to tiny bays unknown. Tears follow them, falling from her drooping lids. Can neither daffodils, nor birds, nor trees give her some little of their joy, to chase the sorrow from her heart? Her soul seems to fling itself outward in an appeal to nature, and nature, that kind of mother of us all, responds to the unspoken cry. A step upon the bridge behind her. She starts in a more upright position, and looks round her without much interest. A dark figure is advancing towards her. Through the growing twilight it seems abnormally large and black, and Joyce stares at it anxiously. Not Freddy, not one of the laborers. They would all be clad in flannel jackets of a light color. "Oh, is it you?" says Dysart, coming closer to her. He had, however, known it was she from the first moment his eyes rested upon her. No mist, no twilight could have deceived him, for lovers' eyes are sharp to see, and lovers' ears in hearing. Yes, says she, advancing a little toward him and giving him her hand, a cold little hand and reluctant. I was coming down to Mrs. Monkton with a message, a letter, from Lady Baltimore. This is a very long way round from the Court, isn't it? Says she. Yes, but I like this calm little corner. I have come often to it lately. Miss Kavanagh lets her eyes wander to the stream down below, to this little spot of all places, her favourite nook. Had he hoped to meet her there? Oh, no, impossible. And besides, she had given it up for a long, long time, until this evening. It seems weeks to her now since last she was here. You will find Barbara at home, says she gently. I don't suppose it is of very much consequence, says he, alluding to the message. He is looking at her, though her averted face leaves him little to study. You are cold, says he abruptly. Am I? Turning to him with a little smile. I don't feel cold. I feel dull, perhaps, but nothing else. And in truth, if she had used the word unhappy instead of dull, she would have been near the mark. The coming of Dysart thus suddenly into the midst of her mournful reverie has but served to accentuate the reality of it. A terrible sense of loneliness is oppressing her. All things have their place in this world, yet where is hers? On what account is she to anyone? Barbara loves her, yes, but not so well as Freddy and the children. Oh, to be first with someone! I find no spring, while spring is well nigh blown. I find no nest, while nests are in the grove. Woe's me for mine own heart that dwells alone, my heart that breaketh for a little love. Christina Rossetti's mournful words seem to suit her. Involuntarily she lifts her heavy eyes, tired of the day's weeping, and looks at Dysart. You have been crying, says he abruptly. End of chapter 51. Recording by Linda Marie Nielsen, Vancouver, BC. Chapter number 52 of April's Lady. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Linda Marie Nielsen, Vancouver, BC. April's Lady by Margaret Wolfe Hungerford. Chapter 52. My love has sworn with sealing kiss, with me to live, to die. I have at last my nameless bliss. As I love, loved am I. There is a pause. It threatens to be an everlasting one, as Miss Kavanagh plainly doesn't know what to say. He can see this. What he cannot see is that she is afraid of her own voice. Those troublesome tears that all day have been so close to her seem closer than ever now. Beauclerk came down to see you to-day, says he presently. This remark is so unexpected that it steadies her. Yes, she says, calmly enough, but without raising the telltale eyes. You expected him? No, monosyllables only seem possible to her. So great is her fear that she will give way and finally disgrace herself, that she forgets to resent the magisterial tone B has adopted. He asked you to marry him, however. There is something almost threatening in his tone now, as if he is defying her to deny his assertion. It overwhelms her. Yes, she says again, and for the first time is struck by the wretched meagreness of her replies. Well, says Dysart roughly, but this time not even the desolate monosyllable rewards the keenness of his examination. Well, says he again, going closer to her and resting his hand on the wooden rail against which she, too, was leaning. He is so close to her now that it is impossible to escape his scrutiny. What am I to understand by that? Tell me how you have decided. Getting no answer to this either, he says impatiently, Tell me, Joyce. I refused him, says she at last in a low tone, and in a dull sort of way, as if the matter is one of indifference to her. Ah! He draws a long breath. Is it true? He says, laying his hand on hers as it lies on the top of the woodwork. Quite true. And yet, you have been crying? You can see that, says she penitently. You have taken pains to see and to tell me of it. Do you think it is a pleasant thing to be told? Most people, glancing angrily toward him, everyone, I think, makes it a point nowadays not to see when one has been making a fool of oneself, but you seem to take delight in torturing me. Did it? Says he bitterly, ignoring, perhaps not even hearing, her outburst. Did it cost you so much to refuse him? It cost me nothing, with a sudden effort, and a flash from her beautiful eyes. Nothing? I have said so. Nothing at all. It was mere nervousness, and because it reminded me of other things. Did he see you cry? Asked Dysart, tightening unconsciously his grasp upon her hand. No. He was gone a long time, quite a long time, before it occurred to me that I should like to cry. I, with a frugal smile, indulged myself very freely then, as you have seen. Dysart draws a long breath of relief. It would have been intolerable to him that Beauclerk should have known of her tears. He would not have understood them. He would have taken possession of them, as it were. They would have merely helped to pamper his self-conceit and smooth down his ruffled pride. He would inevitably have placed such and such a construction on them, one entirely to his own glorification. I shall leave you now with a lighter heart, says Felix presently, now that I know you are not going to marry that fellow. You are going, then? Says she sharply, checking the monotonous little tattoo she has been playing on the bridge rail, as though suddenly smitten into stone. She had heard he was going. She had been told of it by several people, but somehow she had never believed it. It had never come home to her until now. Yes, we are under orders for India. We sail in about a month. I shall have to leave here almost immediately. So soon? Says she, vaguely. She has begun that absurd tattoo again. But bridge, and restless little fingers, and sky and earth, all things seem blotted out. He is going, really going, and forever. How far is India away? It is always rather hurried at last. For my part, I am glad I am going. Yes? Mrs. Monkton will, at least I am sure she will, let me have a line now and then to let me know how you are all getting on. I was going to ask her about it this evening. You think she will be good enough? Barbara is always kind. I suppose, he hesitates and then goes on with an effort, I suppose it would be too much to ask of you. What? That you would sometimes write me a letter, however short? I'm a bad correspondent, says she, feeling as if she was choking. Ah, I see. I should not have asked, of course. Yes, you are right. It was absurd, my hoping for it. When people choose to go away so far as that, she is compelling herself to speak, but her voice sounds to herself a long way off. They must hope to be forgotten, out of sight, out of mind. I know, it is such an old proverb. Well, you are cold, says he suddenly, noting the pallor of the girl's face. Whatever you were before, you are certainly chilled to the bone now. You look it. Come, this is no time of year to be lingering out of doors without a coat or hat. I have this shawl, says she, pointing to the soft white, fleecy thing that covers her. I distrust it. Come. No, she says faintly. Go on, you give your message to Barbara. As for me, I shall be happier here. Where I am not, says he, with a bitter laugh. I suppose I ought to be accustomed to that thought now, but such is my conceit that it seems ever a fresh shock to me. Well, for all that, persuadingly, come in. The evening is very cold. I shan't like to go away, leaving you behind me suffering from a bad cough, or something of that kind. We have been friends, Joyce, with a rather sorry smile. For the sake of the old friendship, don't send me adrift with such anxiety on my mind. Would you really care? Says she. Ah, that is the humor of it, says he. In spite of it all, I should still really care. Come. He makes an effort to unclasp the small, pretty fingers that are grasping the rails so rigidly. At first they seem to resist his gentle pressure, and then they give way to him. She turns suddenly. Felix! Her voice is somewhat strained, somewhat harsh. Not all her own voice. Do you still love me? You know that, returns he, sadly. If he has felt any surprise at the question, he has not shown it. No, no, says she, feverishly. That you like me, that you are fond of me, perhaps, I can still believe, but it is the same with you that it used to be. Do you, with a little sob, love me as well now as in those old days? Just the same? Not. Going near to him and laying her hand upon his breast, and raising agonized eyes of inquiry to his. Not one bit less? I love you 1,000 times more, says he, very quietly, but with such intensity that it enters into her very soul. Why? He has laid his own hand over the small nervous one lying on his breast, and his face has grown very white. Because I love you too. She stops here, and begins to tremble violently. With a little shamed, heartbroken gesture, she tears her hand out of his, and covers her face from his sight. Say that again, says he, hoarsely. He waits a moment, but when no word comes from her, he deliberately drags away the sheltering hands, and compels her to look at him. Say it, says he, in a tone that is now almost a command. Oh, it is true, true, cries she, vehemently. I love you. I have loved you a long time, I think, but I didn't know. Oh, Felix, dear, dear Felix, forgive me. Forgive you, says he, brokenly. Ah, yes, and don't leave me. If you go away from me, I shall die. There has been so much of it. A little more, and she breaks down. My beloved, says he, in a faint, quick way. He is holding her to him now with all his might. She can feel the quick pulsations of his heart. Suddenly she slips her soft arms around his neck, and now with her head pressed against his shoulder bursts into a storm of tears. It is a last shower. They are both silent for a long time, and then he, raising one of her hands, presses the palm against his lips. Looking up at him, she smiles, uncertainly but happy, a very rainbow of a smile, born of sunshine, and raindrops gone. It seems to beautify her lips, but Felix, while acknowledging its charm, cannot smile back at her. It is all too strange, too new. He is afraid to believe. And yet there is something terrible to him in this happiness that has fallen into his life. "You mean it?" he asked, bending over her. "If tomorrow I were to wake and find all this an idle dream, how would it be with me then? Say you mean it." "Am I not here?" says she, tremulously, making a slight but eloquent pressure on one of the arms that are around her. He bends his face to hers, and as he feels that first glad eager kiss returned, he knows. Chapter 52. Recording by Linda Marie Nielsen, Vancouver, BC. Chapter 53 of April's Lady. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Linda Marie Nielsen, Vancouver, BC. April's Lady by Margaret Wolfe Hungerford. Chapter 53. True love's the gift which God has given To man alone beneath the heaven. It is the secret sympathy, the silver link, the silken tie, Which heart to heart and mind to mind, in body and in soul can bind. Of course Barbara is delighted. She proves charming as a confidante. Nothing can exceed the depth of her sympathy. When Joyce and Felix came in together in the darkening twilight, entering the house in burglarious fashion through the dining room window, it so happens that Barbara is there, and is at once struck by the sense of guilt that seems to surround and envelop them. They had not, indeed, anticipated meeting Barbara in that room of all others, and are rather taken aback when they come face to face with her. "I assure you we have not come after the spoons," says Felix in a would-be careless tone that could not have deceived an infant, and with a laugh so frightfully careless that it would have terrified the life out of you. "You certainly don't look like it," says Mrs. Monkton, whose heart has begun to beat high with hope. She hardly knows whether it is better to fall upon their necks forthwith and declare she knows all about it, or else to pretend ignorance. She decides upon the latter as being the easier. After all, they mightn't like the neck process. Most people have a fancy for telling their own tales. To have them told for one is annoying. "You haven't the requisite murderous expression," she says, unable to resist a touch of satire. "You look rather frightened, you two. What have you been doing?" She is too good natured not to give them an opening for their confession. "Not much, and yet a great deal," says Felix. He has advanced a little, while Joyce, on the contrary, has meanly receded farther into the background. She has rather the appearance, indeed, of one who, if the wall could have been induced to give way, would gladly have followed it into the garden. The wall, however, declines to budge. "As for burglary," goes on Felix, trying to be gay, and succeeding villainously, "you must exonerate your sister at all events, but I confess I have stolen something belonging to you." "Oh, no, not stolen," says Joyce in a rather faint tone. "Barbara, I know what you will think, but " "I know what I do think," cries Barbara joyously. "Oh, is it? Can it be true?" It never occurs to her that Felix is now not altogether a brilliant match for her sister with a fortune. She remembers only that in that lovely mind of hers he has loved Joyce when she was without a penny, and that he is now what he has always seemed to her, the one man that could make Joyce happy. Yes, it is true, says Dysart. He has given up that unsuccessful gaiety now, and has grown very grave. There is even a slight tremble in his voice. He comes up to Mrs. Monkton and takes both her hands. She has given herself to me. You are really glad. You are not angry about it. I know I am not good enough for her, but here Joyce gives way to a little outburst of mirth that is rather tremulous, and coming away from the unfriendly wall that has not been of the least use to her, brings herself somewhat shamefacedly into the only light the room receives through the western window. The twilight at all events is kind to her. It is difficult to see her face. I really can't stay here, says she, and listen to my own praises being sung. And besides, turning to Felix a lovely but embarrassed face, Barbara will not regard it as you do. She will, on the contrary, say you are a great deal too good for me, and that I ought to be pillorized for all the trouble I have given, though not being able to make up my own mind for so long a time. Indeed, I shall say nothing but that you are the dearest girl in the world, and that I am delighted things have turned out so well. I always said it would be like this, cries Barbara exultantly, who certainly never had said it, and had always indeed been distinctly doubtful about it. Is Mr. Monkton in? Says Felix, in a way that leads Monkton's wife to imagine that if she should chance to say he was out, the news would be hailed with rapture. Oh, never mind him, says she, beaming upon the happy but awkward couple before her. I'll tell him all about it. He will be just as glad as I am. There, go away, you two. You will find the small parlor empty, and I dare say you had a great deal to say to each other still. Of course you will dine with us, Felix, and give Freddy an opportunity of saying something ridiculous to you. Thank you, says Dysart warmly. I suppose I can write a line to my cousin explaining matters. Of course, Joyce. Take some writing things into the small parlor and call for a lamp as you go. She is smiling at Joyce as she speaks, and now, going up to her, kisses her impulsively. Joyce returns the caress with fever. It is natural that she should never have felt the sweetness, the content of Barbara so entirely as she does now, when her heart is open and full of ecstasy, and when sympathy seems so necessary. Darling Barbara! But then she must love Felix now just as much as she loves her. She rather electrifies Barbara and Felix by saying anxiously to the former, "Kiss Felix, too." It is impossible not to laugh. Mrs. Monkton gives way to immediate and unrestrained mirth, and Dysart follows suit. It is a command, says he, and Barbara thereupon kisses him affectionately. Well, now I have got a brother at last, says she. It is indeed her first knowledge of one, for that poor suicide in Nice had never been anything to her, nor to anyone else in the world for the matter of that, except a great trouble. There, go, says she. I think I hear Freddy coming. Then fly. They both feel that further explanations are beyond them just at present, and as for Barbara, she is quite determined that no one but she shall let Freddy into the all-important secret. She is now fully convinced in her own mind that she always had special prescience of this affair, and the devouring desire we all have to say I told you how 'twould be to our unfortunate fellow travelers through this vale of tears, whether the cause for the hateful reminder be for weal or woe, is strong upon her now. She goes to the window, and seeing Monkton some way off, flings up the sash and waves to him in a frenzied fashion to come to her at once. There is something that almost approaches tragedy in her air and gesture. Monkton hastens to obey. "Now what do you think has happened?" cries she, when he has vaulted the window sill and is standing beside her, somewhat breathless and distinctly uneasy. Nothing short of an accident to the children could, in his opinion, have warranted so vehement a call. Yet Barbara, as he examines her features carefully, seems all joyous excitement. After a short contemplation of her beaming face he tells himself that he was an ass to give up that pilgrimage of his to the lower field, where he had been going to inspect a newborn calf. "The skies are all right," says he, with an upward glance at them through the window, "and you hadn't another uncle, had you?" "Oh, Freddy," says she, very justly disguised. "Well, my good child, what then? I am all curiosity." "Guess," says she, too happy to be able to give him the round scolding he deserves. "Oh, if it's a riddle," says he, "you might remember I am only a little one, and unequal to the great things of life." "Ah! But, Freddy, I've something delicious to tell you. There, sit down. You look quite queer, while "No wonder I do," he says at last rather wrathfully. "To judge by your wild gesticulations at the window just now, anyone might have imagined that the house was on fire and a hostile race tearing en masse into the back yard, and now why, it appears you are quite pleased about something or another. Really, such disappointments are enough to age any man, or make him look queer. That was the word you used, I think." "Listen," says she, seating herself beside him, and flipping her arm around his neck. "Joyce is going to marry Felix, after all. There!" Still with her arm holding him, she leans back a little to mark the effect of this astounding disclosure. CHAPTER 54. Of April's Lady. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Linda Marie Nielsen, Vancouver, BC. April's Lady by Margaret Wolfe Hungerford. Chapter 54. Well said, that was laid on with a trowel. Gratiano speaks an infinite deal of nothing, more than any man in all Venice. "After all, indeed, you may well say that," says Mr. Monkton, with indignation. "If those two idiots meant matrimony all along, why on earth didn't they do it all before? See what a lot of time they've lost, and what a disgraceful amount of trouble they have given all round." "Yes, yes, of course. But then you see, Freddy, it takes some time to make up one's mind about such an important matter as that." "It didn't take you long," says Mr. Monkton most unwisely. "It took me a great deal longer than it took you," replies his wife with dignity. "You have always said that it was the very first day you ever saw me, and I'm sure it took me quite a week." This lucid speech she delivers with some severity. "More shame for you," says Monkton promptly. "Well, never mind," says she, too happy and too engrossed with her news to enjoy even a skirmish with her husband. "Isn't it all charming, Freddy?" "It certainly turned out very well, all things considered." "I think it is the happiest thing, and when two people who love each other are quite young." "Really, my dear, you are too flattering," says Monkton. "Considering the gray hairs that are beginning to make themselves so unpleasantly at home in my head, at all events, can hardly lay claim to extreme youth." "Good gracious, I'm not talking of us, I'm talking of them," cries she, giving him a shake. "Wake up, Freddy. Bring your mind to bear upon this big news of mine, and you will see how enchanting it is. Don't you think Felix has behaved beautifully? So faithful, so constant, and against such terrible odds. You know Joyce is a little difficult sometimes. Now hasn't he been perfect all through?" "He is a genuine hero of romance," says Mr. Monkton with conviction. "None of your cheap articles. A regular bona fide 13th century knight. The country ought to contribute its stray halfpennies and buy him a pedestal and put him on the top of it, whether he likes it or not. Once there Simon Stylites would be forgotten in half an hour. Was there ever before heard of such a heroic case? Did ever yet living man have the prowess to propose to the girl he loved? It is an entirely new departure, and should be noticed. It is quite unique." "Don't be horrid," says his wife. "You know exactly what I mean that it is a delightful ending to what promised to be a miserable muddle. And he is so charming, isn't he now, Freddy?" "Is he?" asks Mr. Monkton, regarding her with a thoughtful eye. "You can see for yourself. He is so satisfactory. I always said he was the very husband for Joyce. He is so kind, so earnest, so sweet in every way." "Nearly as sweet as I am, eh?" There is a stern inquiry now in his regard. "Pouf! I knew what you are, of course. Who would, if I didn't? But really, Freddy, don't you think he will make her an ideal husband? So open, so frank, so free from everything everything oh, well, everything, you know." "I don't," says Monkton uncompromisingly. "Well, everything hateful, I mean. Oh, she is a lucky girl." "Nearly as lucky as her sister," says Monkton, growing momentarily more stern in his determination to uphold his own cause. "Don't be absurd. I declare," with a little burst of amusement, "when they told me about it, I never felt so happy in my life." "Except when you married me." He throws quite a tragical expression into his face, that is, however, lost upon her. "Of course, with her present fortune, she might have made what the world would call a more distinguished match. But his family are unexceptionable, and he has some money not much, I know, but still, some and even if he hadn't, she has now enough for both. After all," with noble disregard of the necessities of life, "what is money?" "Dross, mere dross," says Mr. Monkton. "And he is just the sort of man not to give a thought to it." "He couldn't, my dear. Heroes of romance are quite above all that sort of thing." "Well, he is certainly," says Mrs. Monkton, a little offended. "You may go on pretending as much as you like, Freddy, but I know you think about him just as I do. He is exactly the sort of charming character to make Joyce happy." "Nearly as happy as I have made you," says her husband, severely. "Dear me, Freddy, I really do wish you would try and forget yourself for one moment." "I might be able to do that, my dear, if I were quite sure that you were not forgetting me too." "Oh, as to that, I declare you are a perfect baby. You love teasing. Well, there then." The "there" represents a kiss, and Mr. Monkton, having graciously accepted this tribute to his charms, condescends to come down from his mental elevation and discuss the new engagement with considerable affability. Once, indeed, there is a dangerous lapse back into his old style, but this time there seems to be occasion for it. When they stood there stammering and stuttering, Freddy, and looking so awfully silly, I declare I was so glad about it that I actually kissed him. "What?" says Mr. Monkton. "And you have lived to tell the tale? You have, therefore, lived too long. Perfidious women, prepare for death." "I declare I think you'd have done it," says Barbara eloquently. Whereupon, having reconsidered her speech, they both give way to mirth. "I'll try it when I see him," says Monkton. "Even a hero of romance couldn't object to a chaste salute from me." "He is coming to dinner. I hope when you do see him, Freddy," anxiously this, "you will be very sober about it." "Barbara, you know I never get that is, not before dinner at all events." "Well, but you promise me now. You will be very serious about it. They are taking it seriously, and they won't like it if you persist in treating it as a jest." "I'll be a perfect judge." "I know what that means," indignantly, "that you are going to be as frivolous as possible." "My dear girl, if the bench could only hear you! Well, there, then. Yes, really, I'll be everything of the most desirable, a regular funeral mute, and," seeing she is still offended, "I am glad about it. Barbara, honestly, I think him as good a fellow as I know, and Joyce another." Having convinced her of his good faith in the matter, and argued with her on every single point, and so far perjured himself as to remember perfectly and accurately the very day and hour on which, 3 months ago, she had said that she knew Joyce preferred Felix to Beauclerk, he is forgiven, and presently allowed to depart in peace with another there, even warmer than the first. But it is unquestionable that she keeps a severe eye on him all through dinner, and so forbids any trifling with the sacred topic. It would have put the poor things out so, she had said to herself, and indeed it must be confessed that the lovers are very shy and uncomfortable, and that conversation drifts a good deal, and is only carried on irregularly by fits and starts. But later, when Felix has unburdened his mind to Monkton during the quarter of an hour over their wine, when Barbara has been compelled, in fear and trembling, to leave Freddy to his own devices, things grow more genial, and the extreme happiness that dwells in the lovers' hearts is given full play. There is even a delightful half hour granted them upon the balcony, Barbara having, like the good angel she is, declared that the night is almost warm enough for June. End of chapter 54. Recording by Linda Marie Nielsen, Vancouver, BC. Chapter 55 of April's Lady. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Linda Marie Nielsen, Vancouver, BC. April's Lady by Margaret Wolfe Hungerford. Chapter 55. Great discontents there are, and many murmurs. There is a kind of mournful eloquence in thy dumb grief. Lady Baltimore, too, had been very pleased by the news when Felix told her next morning of his good luck. In all her own great unhappiness, she had still a kindly word and thought for her cousin and his fiancée. One of the nicest girls, she says, pressing his hands warmly. I often think, indeed, the nicest girl I know. You are fortunate, Felix, but," very kindly, "she is fortunate too." "Oh, no, the luck is all on my side," says he. "It will be a blow to Norman," she says presently. "I think not," with an irrepressible touch of scorn. "There is Miss Maliphant." "You mean that he can decline upon her? Of course I quite understand that you do not like him," says she with a quick sigh. "But believe me, any heart he has was really given to Joyce. Well, he must devote himself to ambition now. Miss Maliphant can help him to that." "No, no, that is all knocked on the head. It appears this is in strictest confidence, Felix but it appears he asked her to marry him last evening, and she refused." Felix turns to her as if to give utterance to some vehement words, and then checks himself. After all, why add to her unhappiness? Why tell her of that cur's baseness? Her own brother, too! It would be but another grief to her. To think he should have gone from her to Miss Maliphant. What a pitiful creature, beneath contempt! Well, if his pride survives those two downfalls, both in one day, it must be made of leather. It does Felix good to think of how Miss Maliphant must have worded her refusal. She is not famous for grace of speech. He must have had a real bad time of it. Of course, Joyce had told him of her interview with the sturdy heiress. "Ah, she refused?" says he, hardly knowing what to say. "Yes, and not very graciously, I'm afraid. He gave me the mere fact of the refusal, no more, and only that because he had to give a reason for his abrupt departure. You know he is going this evening." "No, I did not know it. Of course, under the circumstances." "Yes, he could hardly stay here. Margaret came to me and said she would go, but I would not allow that. After all, every woman has a right to refuse or accept as she will." "True." His heart gives an exultant leap as he remembers how his love had willed. "I only wish she had not hurt him in the refusal. But I could see he was wounded. He was not in his usual careless spirits. He struck me as being a little well, you know, a little " she hesitates. "Out of temper?" suggests Felix involuntarily. "Well, yes. Disappointment takes that course with some people. After all, it might have been worse if she had set his heart on Joyce and been refused." "Much worse," says Felix, his eyes on the ground. "She would have been a severe loss." Severe indeed. By this time Felix is beginning to feel like an advanced hypocrite. "As for Margaret Maliphant, I'm afraid he was more concerned about the loss of her bonds and scrips than of herself. It is a terrible world, Felix, when all is told," says she, suddenly crossing her beautiful long white hands over her knees and leaning toward him. There is a touch of misery so sharp in her voice that he starts as he looks at her. It is a momentary fit of emotion, however, and passes before he dare comment on it. With a heart nigh to breaking, she still retains her composure and talks calmly to Felix, and lets him talk to her, as though the fact that she is soon to lose forever the man who once had gained her heart, that fatal once that means for always, in spite of everything that has come and gone, is as little or nothing to her. Seeing her sitting there, strangely pale indeed, but so collected, it would be impossible to guess at the tempest of passion and grief and terror that reigns within her breast. Women are not so strong to bear as men, and therefore in the world's storms suffer most. "It is a lovely world," says he smiling, thinking of Joyce, and then, remembering her sad lot, his smile fades. "One might make, perhaps, a bad world better," he says, stammering. "Ah, teach me how," says she, with a melancholy glance. "There is such a thing as forgiveness. Forgive him!" blurts he out in a frightened sort of way. He is horrified at himself, at his own temerity, a second later, and rises to his feet as if to meet the indignation he has certainly courted. But to his surprise no such indignation betrays itself. "Is that your advice?" says she, still with the thin white hands clasped over the knee, and the earnest gaze on him. "Well, well, well." Her eyes droop. She seems to be thinking, and he, gazing at her, refrains from speech with his heart sad with pity. Presently she lifts her head and looks at him. "There, go back to your love," she says, with a glance that thrills him. "Tell her from me that if you had the whole world to choose from, I shall still select her as your wife. I like her. I love her. There, go!" She seems to grow all at once very tired. Are those tears that are rising in her eyes? She holds out to him her hand. Felix, taking it, holds it closely for a moment, and presently, as if moved to do it, he stoops and presses a warm kiss upon it. She is so unhappy, and so kind, and so true. God deliver her out of her sorrow. End of chapter 55. Recording by Linda Marie Nielsen, Vancouver, BC. Chapter 56 of April's Lady. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Linda Marie Nielsen, Vancouver, BC. April's Lady by Margaret Wolfe Hungerford. Chapter 56. I would that I were low laid in my grave. She is still sitting silent, lost in thought, after Felix's departure, when the door opens once again to admit her husband. His hands are full of papers. "Are you at liberty?" says he. "Have you a moment? These," pointing to the papers, "want signing. Can you give your attention to them now?" "What are they?" asks she, rising. "Mere law papers." "You need not look so terrified." His tone is bitter. "There are certain matters that must be arranged before my departure, matters that concern your welfare and the boys'." Here, laying the papers upon the davenport and spreading them out, "you sign your name here." "But," recoiling, "what is it? What does it all mean?" "It is not your death warrant, I assure you," says he, with a sneer. "Come, sign." Seeing her still hesitate, he turns upon her savagely. Who shall say what hidden storms of grief and regret lie within that burst of anger? "Do you want your son to live and die a poor man?" says he. "Come, there is yourself to be considered, too. Once I am out of your way, you will be able to begin life again with a light heart, and this," tapping the paper heavily, "will enable you to do it. I make over to you and the boy everything, at least as nearly everything as will enable me to live." "It should be the other way," says she. "Take everything, and leave us enough on which to live." "Why?" says he, facing round, something in her voice that resembles remorse striking him. "We, shall have each other, says she faintly. Having happily got rid of such useless lumber as the father and husband, well, you will be the happier so, rejoins he with a laugh that hurts him more than it hurts her, though she cannot know that. Two is company, you know, according to the good old proverb, three trumpery. You and he will get on very well without me, no doubt. It is your arrangement, says she. If that thought is a salve to your conscience, pray think so, rejoins he. It isn't worth an argument. We are only wasting time. He hands her the pen. She takes it mechanically, but makes no use of it. You will at least tell me where you are going, says she. Certainly I should, if only I knew myself. To America first, but that is a big direction, and I am afraid the tenderest love letter would not reach me through it. When your friends ask you, say I have gone to the North Pole. It is as likely a destination as another. But not to know, says she, lifting her dark eyes to his, dark eyes that seemed to glow like fire in her white face. That would be terrible. It is unfair. You should think. Her voice grows husky and uncertain. She stops abruptly. Don't be uneasy about that, says he. I shall take care that my death, when it occurs, is made known to you as soon as possible. Your mind shall be relieved on that score with as little delay as I can manage. The welcome news shall be conveyed to you by a swift messenger. She flings the pen upon the writing table and turns away. Insult me to the last if you will, says she, but consider your son. He loves you. He will desire news of you from time to time. It is impossible that you can put him out of your life as you have put me. It appears you can be unjust to the last, says he, flinging her own accusation back at her. Have I put you out of my life? Ah, was I ever in it? Says she. But you will write? No, not a line. Once for all I break with you. Should my death occur you will hear of it, and I have arranged so that now and after that event you and the boy will have your positions clearly defined. That is all you can possibly require of me. Even if you marry again, your jointure will be secured to you. Baltimore! Exclaims she, turning upon him passionately. She seems to struggle with herself for words. Has marriage proved so sweet a thing, cries she presently, that I should care to try it again? There, go, I shall sign none of these things. She makes a disdainful gesture towards the loose papers lying on the table, and moves angrily away. You have your son to consider. Your son will inherit the title and property without these papers. There are complications, however, that perhaps you do not understand. Let them lie there. I shall sign nothing. In that case you will probably find yourself immersed in troubles of the meaner kinds after my departure. The child cannot inherit until after my death, and I do not care, says she sullenly. Go if you will. I refuse to benefit by it. What a stubborn woman you are, cries he, in great wrath. You have for years declined to acknowledge me as your husband. You have by your manner almost commanded my absence from your side. Yet now, when I bring you the joyful news that in a short time you'll actually be rid of me, you throw 1,000 difficulties in my path. Is it that you desire to keep me near you for the purposes of torture? It is too late for that. You have gone a trifle too far. The hope you have so clearly expressed in many ways that time would take me out of your path is at last about to be fulfilled. I have had no such hope. No? You can look me in the face and say that? Saintly lips never lie. However, do they? Well, I am sick of this life. You are not. I have borne a good deal from you, as I told you before. I bear no more. I give in. Fate has been too strong for me." "You have created your own fate." "You are my fate. You are inexorable. There is no reason why I should stay." Here the sound of running, childish, pattering footsteps can be heard outside the door, and a merry little shout of laughter. The door is suddenly burst open in rather unconventional style, and Bertie rushes into the room, a fox terrier at his heels. The dog is evidently quite as much up to the game as the boy, and both race tempestuously up the room and precipitate themselves against Lady Baltimore's skirts. Round and round her the chase continues, until the boy, bursting away from his mother, dashes toward his father, the terrier after him. There isn't so much scope for talent in a pair of trousers as in a mass of dainty petticoats, and presently Bertie grows tired, flings himself down upon the ground, and lets the dog tumble over him there. The joust is virtually at an end. Lady Baltimore, who has stood immovable during the attack upon her, always with that cold, white, beautiful look upon her face, now points to the stricken child lying panting, laughing, and playing with the dog at his father's feet. "There is a reason," says she, almost inaudibly. Baltimore shakes his head. "I have thought all that out. It is not enough," says he. "Bertie," says his mother, turning to the child, "do you know this, that your father is going to leave you?" "Going?" says the boy vaguely, forgetting the dog for a moment, and glancing upward. "Where?" "Away forever." "Where?" says the boy again. He rises to his feet now, and looks anxiously at his father, then smiles and flings himself into his arms. "Oh, no," says he in a little soft, happy, sure sort of way. "Forever, forever," repeats Isabel in a curious monotone. "Take me up," says the child, tugging at his father's arms. "What does mamma mean? Where are you going?" "To America to shoot bears," returns Baltimore, with an embarrassed laugh. How near to tears it is. "Real, live bears?" "Yes." "Take me with you," says the child excitedly. "And leave mamma?" "Or she'll come too," says Bertie confidently. "She'll come where I go." Where he would go, the child. But would she go where the father went? Baltimore's brow darkens. "I am afraid it is out of the question," he says, putting Bertie back again upon the carpet where the fox terrier is barking furiously and jumping up and down in a frenzied fashion, as if desirous of devouring the child's legs. "The bears might eat you. When you are big and strong " "You will come back for me?" cries Bertie eagerly. "Perhaps." "He will not," breaks in Lady Baltimore violently. "He will come back no more. When he goes you will never see him again. He has said so. He is going forever." These last two terrible words seem to have sunk into her soul. She cannot cease from repeating them. "Let the boy alone," says Baltimore angrily. The child is looking from one parent to the other. He seems puzzled, expectant, but scarcely unhappy. Childhood can grasp a great deal, but not all. The more unhappy the childhood, the more it can understand of the sudden and larger waves of life. But children delicately brought up and clothed in love from their cradle find it hard to realize that an end to their happiness can ever come. "Tell me, papa," says he at last in a vague, sweet little way. "What is there to tell?" replies the father, with a most meagre laugh, "except that I saw Beecher bringing in some fresh oranges half an hour ago. Perhaps he hasn't eaten them all yet. If you were to go ask for one " "I'll find him," cries Bertie brightly, forgetting everything but the present moment. "Come, Trixie, come," to his dog. "You shall have some, too." "You see there won't be much trouble with him," says Baltimore, when the boy has run out of the room in pursuit of oranges. "It will take him a day, perhaps, and after that he will be quite your own. If you won't sign these papers to day, you will perhaps to morrow. I had better go and tell Hansard that you would like to have a little time to look them over." He walks quickly down the room, opens the door, and closes it after him. End of chapter 56. Recording by Linda Marie Nielsen, Vancouver, BC. Chapter 57 of April's Lady. This is the LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Linda Marie Nielsen, Vancouver, BC. April's Lady by Margaret Wolfe Hungerford. Chapter 57. This is that happy morn, that day, long wished day, of all my life so dark, if cruel stars have not my ruin sworn, and fates my hopes betray, which purely white deserves an everlasting diamond should it mark. He has not, however, gone 3 yards down the corridor when the door is again opened and Lady Baltimore's voice calls after him. "Baltimore!" Her tone is sharp, high, agonized, the tone of one strung to the highest pitch of despair. It startles him. He turns to look at her. She is standing framed in by the doorway, and one hand is grasping the woodwork with a hold so firm that the knuckles are showing white. With the other hand she beckons him to approach her. He obeys her. He is even so frightened at the strange grey look in her face that he draws her bodily into the room again, shutting the door with a pressure of the hand he can best spare. "What is it?" says he, looking down at her. She has managed to so far overcome the faintness that has been threatening her as to shake him off and stand free, leaning against a chair behind her. "Don't go," says she hoarsely. It is impossible to misunderstand her meaning. It has nothing whatever to do with his interview with the lawyer waiting so patiently down below, but with the final wandering of his into regions unknown. She is as white as death. "How is this, Isabel?" asks he. He is as white as she is now. "Do you know what you are saying? This is a moment of excitement. You do not comprehend what your words mean." "Stay, stay for his sake." "Is that all?" says he, eyes searching hers. "For mine, then." The words seem to scorch her. She covers her face with her hands and stands before him, stricken dumb, miserable, confessed. "For yours!" He goes closer to her, and ventures to take her hand. It is cold, cold as death. His is burning. "You have given a reason for my staying indeed," says he. "But what is the meaning of it?" "This!" cried she, throwing up her head, and showing him her shamed and grief stricken face. "I am a coward. In spite of everything, I would not have you go so far." "I see. I understand," he sighs heavily. "And yet that story was a foul lie. It is all that stands between us, Isabel. Is it not so? But you will not believe." There is a long silence, during which neither of them stirs. They seem wrapped in thought, in silence, he still holding her hand. "If it was a lie," says she at last, breaking the quiet around them by an effort, "would you so far forgive my distrust of you as to be holding my hand like this?" "Yes." What is there I would not forgive you? Says he. And it was a lie. Cyril, cries she in great agitation, take care! It is a last moment. Do you dare to tell me that still? Supposing your story to be true, and mine, that woman's, false, how would it be between us then? As it was in the first good old time when we were married. You could forgive the wrong I have done you all these years, supposing everything, all. Ah! This sound seems crushed out of her. She steps backward, and a dry sob breaks from her. What is it? asks he quickly. Oh, that I could, that I dared, believe, says she. You would have proofs, says he coldly, resigning her hand. My word is not enough. You might love me did I prove worthy. Your love is not strong enough to endure the pang of distrust. Was ever real love so poor a thing as that? However, you shall have them. What? asks she, raising her head. The proofs you desire, responds he, icily. That woman, your friend, the Immaculate One, died the day before yesterday. What? You never heard? And you and she? She was nothing to me, says Lady Baltimore. Nothing since the day she reviled me, and yet, with a most joyous laugh, for the sake of a woman you cared so little about, that even her death has not caused you pang, you severed the tie that should have been the closest to you on earth? Well, she is dead. Heaven rest her soul, as the peasants say. She wrote me a letter on her bed of death. Yes, eagerly. You still doubt? says he, with a stern glance at her. So be it. You shall see the letter, though how will you satisfy you? For you can always gratify your desire for suspicion by regarding it as a forgery. The woman herself is dead, so, of course, there is no one to contradict. Do think this all out, says he, with a contemptuous laugh, before you commit yourself to a fresh belief in me. You see I give you every chance. To such a veritable Thomas in petticoats every road should be laid open. Now, tauntingly, will you wait here whilst I bring the proof? He is gazing at her in a heartbroken sort of way. Is it the end? Is it all really over? There had been a faint flicker of the dying candle, a tiny glare, and now for all time is it to be darkness? As for her, ever since he had let her hand go, she had stood with bent head looking at it. He had taken it, he had let it go. There seemed to be a promise of heaven. Was it a false one? She is silent, and Baltimore, who had hoped for one word of trust, of belief, makes a gesture of despair. I will bring you the letter, he says, moving toward the door. When he does bring it, when she had read it and satisfied herself of the loyalty so long doubted, where, he asks himself, will they two be then? Further apart than ever? He has forgiven a great deal, much more than this, and yet, strange human nature, he knows if he once leaves the room and her presence now, he will never return again. The letter she will see, but him, never. The door is open. He has almost crossed the threshold. Once again her voice recalls him. Once again he looks back. She is holding out her arms to him. Cyril, Cyril, she cried, I believe you. She staggers toward him. Mercifully the fountain of her tears breaks loose. She flings herself into his willing arms and sobs out a whole world of grief upon his bosom. It is a cruel moment, yet one fraught with joy as keen as sorrow, a fire of anguish out of which both emerge purified, calmed, gladdened. End of chapter 57. Recording by Linda Marie Nielsen, Vancouver, BC. Chapter 58 of April's Lady. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Linda Marie Nielsen, Vancouver, BC. April's Lady by Margaret Wolfe Hungerford. Chapter 58. Lo, the winter is past, the rain is over and gone. The flowers appear on the earth. The time of the singing of the birds has come. The vague suspicion of rain that had filled their thoughts at breakfast has proved idle. The sun is shining forth again with redoubled vigor, as if laughing their silly doubts to scorn. Never was there so fair a day. One can almost see the plants growing in the garden, and from every bough the nesting birds are singing loud songs of joy. The meadows are showing a lovely green, and in the glades and uplands the daffodils that come before the swallow dares are uprearing their lovely heads. The air is full of sweet scents and sounds, and Joyce, jumping down from the drawing-room window that lies close to the ground, looks gladly round her. Perhaps it is not so much the beauty of the scene as the warmth of happiness in her own heart that brings a smile to her lips and eyes. He will be here today. Involuntarily she raises one hand and looks at the ring that encircles her engaged finger. A charming ring of pearls and sapphires. It evidently brings her happy thoughts, as, after gazing at it for a moment or two, she stoops and presses her lips eagerly to it. It is his first gift, though not his last, and therefore the most precious. What girl does not like receiving a present from her lover? The least mercenary woman on earth must feel a glow at her heart and a fonder recognition of her sweetheart's worth when he lays a love offering at her feet. Joyce, after her one act of devotion to her sweetheart, runs down the garden path and toward the summer house. She is not expecting Dysart until the day has well grown into its afternoon, but, book in hand, she has escaped from all possible visitors to spend a quiet hour in the old earwiggy shanty at the end of the garden, sure of finding herself safe there from interruptions. The sequel proves the futility of all human belief. Inside the summer house, book in hand likewise, sits Mr. Browne, a picture of studious virtue. Miss Kavanagh, seeing him, stops dead short. So great is her surprise, and Mr. Browne, raising his eyes as if with difficulty from the book on his knee, surveys her with a calmly judicial eye. Not here, my child, quotes he incorrectly. You had better try next door. Try for what? Demands she indignantly. For whom, you mean. No, I don't, with increasing anger. Jocelyn, says Mr. Browne severely, when one forsakes the path of truth, it is only to tread in. Nonsense, says Miss Kavanagh irreverently. As you will, says he meekly, but I assure you he is not here. I could have told you that, says she, coloring, however, very warmly. I must say, Dicky, you are the most ingenious, stupid person I have ever met in my life. To shine in even the smallest line in life is to achieve something, says Mr. Browne complacently,
And so you knew he wouldn't be here just now?" This is uttered in an insinuating tone. Miss Kavanagh feels she has made a false move. To give Dicky an inch is, indeed, to give him an ell. "He? Who?" says she weakly. "Don't descend to dissimulation, Jocelyn," advises he severely. "It is the surest road to ruin. If one is to believe the good old copybooks, by he, you see I scorn subterfuge, I mean Dysart, the person to whom in a mistaken moment you have affianced yourself, as though I were not ready at any time to espouse you." "I am not going to be espoused," says Miss Kavanagh, half laughing. "No, I quite understood. I won't have that word," petulantly. "It sounds like something out of the Dark Ages." "So does he," says Mr. Browne. "Felix, you know, so Latin, quite like one of the old monks. I shouldn't wonder if he has turned out a—" "I wish you wouldn't tease me, Dicky," says she. "You think you are amusing, you know, but I think you are one of the rudest people I ever met. I wish you would let me alone." "Ah, why didn't you leave me alone?" with a slight that would have set a furnace ablaze. However, with a noble determination to overcome his grief, "let the past lie. You want to go and meet Dysart, isn't that it? And I'll go and meet him with you. Could self-sacrifice further go? Jim along Josie. No doubt he is at the upper gate by this time, flying on the wings of love." "He is not," says Joyce, "and I wish once for all, Dicky, that you wouldn't call me Josie. Jocelyn is bad enough, but Josie, and I'm not going to Jim anywhere, and certainly," with strong determination, "not with you." She looks at him with sudden curiosity. "What brought you here to-day?" asks she, most inhospitably, it must be confessed. "What brings me here every day? To see the unkindest girl in the world." "She doesn't live here," says Miss Kavanagh. "Dicky," changing her tone suddenly and looking at him with earnest eyes, "what is this I hear about Lady Baltimore and her husband? Be sensible now, do, and tell me." "They're going abroad together, with Bertie. They've made it up," says he, growing as sensible as ever she can desire. "It is such a complete make-up all around they didn't even ask me to go with them. However, I'm determined to join them at Nice on their return from Egypt. Too much billing and cooing is bad for people." "I'm so glad," says Joyce, her eyes filling with tears. "They are two such dear people, and if it hadn't been for Lady— By the by, where is Lady Swansdown?" "Russia, I think." "Well, I liked her, too," says Joyce, with a sigh. "But she wasn't good for Baltimore, was she?" "Not very," says Mr. Browne, dryly. "I should say, on the whole, that she disagreed with him. Tonics are sometimes dangerous." "I'm so delighted," says Joyce, still thinking of Lady Baltimore. "Well," smiling at him, "why don't you go in and see Barbara?" "I have seen her, talked with her a long while, and bid her adieu. I was on my way back to court, having failed my hope of seeing you, when I found this delightful nest of earwigs, and I thought I'd stay and confabulate with them a while in default of better companions." "Poor Dicky!" says she. "Come with me, then, and I'll talk to you for half an hour." "Too late," says he, looking at his watch. "There is only one thing left me now to say to you, and that is good bye." "Why this mad haste?" "Aha! Can I have my little secrets, too?" says he. a whisper in your ear, leaning towards her. No, thank you, says she, waving him off with determination. I remember your last whisper. There, if you can't say to he, good bye indeed. I am going for a walk. She turns away resolutely, leaving Mr. Browne to sink back upon the seat and continue reading, or else go and meet the secret he spoke of. I say, calls he, running after her, you may as well see me as far as the gate anyway. It is evident the book at least has lost its charms. Miss Kavanagh, not being stony-hearted so far, gives in as to walk with him to a side gate, and having finally bidden him adieu, goes back to the summer house he has quitted, and opening her book, prepares to enjoy herself. Vain preparation! It is plain that the fates are against her to-day.
She is no sooner seated, with her book of poetry open on her knee,
than a little flying form turns the corner and Tommy precipitates
himself upon her.
"What are you doing?" asks he. End of chapter 58. Recording by Linda Marie Nielsen, Vancouver, BC.
Chapter 59 of April's Lady. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Linda Marie Nielsen, Vancouver, BC. April's Lady by Margaret Wolfe Hungerford. Chapter 59. Lips are so like flowers, I might snatch at those, redder than the rose leaves, sweeter than the rose. Love is a great master. I am reading, says she. Can't you see that? Read to me then, says Tommy, scrambling up on the bench beside her and snuggling himself under her arm. I love to hear people. Well, not this, at all events, says Miss Kavanagh, placing the dainty copy of the Muses of Mayfair she has been reading on the rustic table in front of her. Why not that one? What is it? asks Tommy, staring at the book. Nothing you would like. Horrid stuff. Only poetry. What's poetry? Oh, nonsense, Tommy. You know very well what poetry is. Your hymns are poetry. This she considers will put an end to all desire for the book in question. It is a clever and skilful move, but it fails signally. There is silence for a moment while Tommy cogitates, and then, are those hymns? Demands he, pointing at the discarded volume. No, not exactly. This is scarcely disingenuous, and Miss Kavanagh has the grace to blush a little. She is the further discomposed in that she becomes aware presently that Tommy sees through her perfectly. Well, what are they? asks he. Oh, well, just poetry, you know. I don't, says Tommy flatly, who is nothing if not painfully truthful. Let me hear them. He pauses here and regards her with searching eye. They, with careful forethought, aren't lessons, are they? No, they are not lessons, says his aunt, laughing, but you wouldn't like them for all that. If you are athirst for literature, get me one of your own books, and I will read Jack the Giant Killer to you. I am sick of them, says Tommy, most ungratefully, that tremendous hero having filled up many an idle hour of his during his short lifetime. No, nestling close to her, go on with your poetry one. You would hate it. It's worse than Jack, says she. Let me hear it, says Tommy persistently. Well, says Miss Kavanagh with a sigh, if you will have it, at least don't interrupt.
She has tried very hard to get rid of him, but having failed in so signal a fashion, she gives herself up with an admirable resignation to the inevitable. "What would I do that for?" asks Tommy rather indignantly. "I don't know, I'm sure, but I thought I'd warn you," says she, wisely precautious. "Now sit down there," pointing to the seat beside her, "and when you feel you've had enough of it, say so at once." "That would be interrupting," says Tommy the conscientious. "Well, I give you leave to interrupt so far," says Joyce, glad to leave him a loophole that may insure his departure before Felix comes. "But no further. Mind that." "Oh, I'm minding," says Tommy impatiently. "Go on. Why don't you begin?" Miss Kavanagh, taking up her book once more, opens it at random. All its contents are sweetmeats of the prettiest, so she is not driven to a choice. She commences to read in a firm, soft voice. "The wind and the beam love the rose, and the roses love one, for who reeks the—" "What's that?" says Tommy. "What's what? You aren't reading it right, are you?" "I certainly am. Why?" "I don't believe a beam of wood could love anything," says Tommy. "It's too heavy." "It doesn't mean a beam of wood, doesn't it?" staring up in her face. "What it means, then, the beam that is in thine own eye?" He is now examining her own eye with great interest. As usual, Tommy is strong in Bible lore. "I have no beams in my eye, I hope," says Joyce, laughing. "And at all events it doesn't mean that, either. The poet who wrote this means a sunbeam." "Well, why couldn't he say so?" says Tommy gruffly. "I really think you had better bring me one of your own books," said Joyce. "I told you this would—" "No," obstinately. "I like this. It sounds so nice and smoothly. Go on," says Tommy, giving her a nudge. Joyce, with a sigh, reopens the volume, and gives herself up for lost. To argue with Tommy has always been known to fatigue, and nothing else. One never gains anything by it. "Well, do be quiet now and listen," says she, protesting faintly. "I'm listening like anything," says Tommy, and indeed now at last it seems as if he were. So silent does he grow as his aunt reads on you might have heard a mouse squeak. But for the low, soft tones of Joyce no smallest sound break the sweet silence of the day. Miss Kavanagh is beginning to feel distinctly flattered. If one can captivate the flitting fancies of a child by one's eloquent rendering of a charming verse, what may one not aspire to? There must be something in her style if it can reduce a boy of 7 to such a state of ecstatic attention, considering the subject is hardly such one as would suit his tender years. But Tommy was always thoughtful beyond his age. A clear, clever little fellow, so appreciative, far, far beyond the average. The mild sweetness of the spring evening and her own thoughts are broken in upon this instant by the "dear clever little fellow." "He has just got your waist now," says he, with an air of wild if subdued excitement. "He? Who? What?" shrieks Joyce, springing to her feet. A long acquaintance with Tommy has taught her to dread the worst. "Oh, there! Of course you've knocked him down, and I did want to see how high he would go. I was tickling his tail to make him hurry up," says Tommy, in an aggrieved tone. "I can't see him anywhere now," peering about on the ground at her feet. "Oh, what is it, Tommy? Do speak!" cries Joyce, in a frenzy of fear and disgust. "'Twas an earwig!" says Tommy, lifting a seraphic face to hers.
and such a big one. He was racing up your dress most beautifully, and now you've upset him. Poor thing! I don't believe he'll ever find his way back to you again." "I shall hope not, indeed," says Miss Kavanagh hastily. "He began at the very end of your frock," goes on Tommy, still searching diligently on the ground, as if to find the earwig with a view to restoring it to its lost hunting ground. "And it wriggled up so nicely. I don't know where he is now," sorrowfully, "unless," with a sudden brightening of his expressive face, "he is up your petticoats." "Tommy!" "What a horrid bad boy you are!" cries poor Joyce, wildly. She gives a frantic shake to the petticoats in question. "Find him at once, sir. He must be somewhere down there. I shan't have an instant's peace until I know where he is." "I cannot see him anywhere," says Tommy. "Maybe you'll feel him presently, and then will know. He isn't on your leg now, is he?" "Oh, don't!" cries Joyce, who looks as if she is going to cry. She gives herself another vigorous shake, and stands away from the spot where Tommy evidently thinks the noxious beast in question may be, with her petticoats held carefully up in both hands. "Oh, Tommy, darling, do find him. He can't be up my petticoats, can he?" "He can. There's nothing they can't do," says Tommy, who is plainly reveling in the storm he has raised. Her open fright is beer and skittles to him. "Why did you stir? He was as good as gold until then, and there wasn't anything to be afraid of. I was watching him. When he got to your ear I'd have told you. I wouldn't like him to make you deaf, but I wanted to see if he would go to your ear. But you spoiled my fun. And now, where is he?" asks Tommy with an awful suggestion in his tone. "On the grass, perhaps," says Joyce, miserably, looking round her everywhere, even on her shoulder. "I don't feel him anywhere." "Sometimes they stay quite a long time, and then they crawl," says Tommy, the most horrible anticipation in his tone. "Really, Tommy," cries his aunt, indignantly, "I do think you are the most abominable boy I ever met in my life. There, go away. I certainly shan't read another line to you, either now or ever." "What is the matter?" asks a voice at this moment that sounds close to her elbow. She turns round with a start. "It is you, Felix," says she, coloring warmly. "Oh, oh, it's nothing, only Tommy, and he said I had an earwig on me, and I was just a little unnerved, you know." "And no wonder," says her lover, with delightful sympathy. "I can't bear that sort of wild animal myself. Tommy, you ought to be ashamed of yourself. When you saw him, why didn't you rise up and slay the destroyer of your aunt's peace? There, run away into the hall. You will find on one of the tables a box of chocolate. I told Mabel it was there. Perhaps she—" Like an arrow from the bow, Tommy departs. "He has evidently his doubts of Mabel," says Joyce, laughing rather nervously. "She is still a little shy with Felix. He doesn't trust her." "No." He has seated himself and now draws her down beside him. "You were reading?" he says. "Yes." "To Tommy?" "Yes," laughing more naturally this time. "Tommy is a more learned person than one would have supposed. Is this the sort of thing he likes?" pointing to Nydia's exquisite song. "I'm afraid not, though he would insist upon me reading it. The earwig was evidently far more engrossing as a subject than either the wind or the rose." "And yet—" He has his arm around her now, and is reading the poem over her shoulder. "You are my rose," says he softly. "And you, do you love but one?"
She makes a little mute gesture that might signify anything or nothing to the uninitiated, but to him his instinct with a most happy meaning. "Am I the one, darling?" She makes the same little silent movement again, but this time she adds to it by casting a swift glance upward at him from under her lowered lids. "Make me sure of it," entreated he almost in a whisper. He leans over her, lower, lower still, with a little tremulous laugh, dangerously akin to tears. She raises her soft palm to his cheek and tries to press him from her, but he holds her fast. "Make me sure," he says again. There is a last faint hesitation on her part, and then their lips meet. "I have doubted always, always a little, ever since that night down by the river," says he. "But now oh, no, you must not doubt me again," says she with tears in her eyes. End of chapter 59. Recording by Linda Marie Nielsen, Vancouver, BC. End of April's Lady, a novel by Mrs. Hungerford.